When a reclusive war veteran finds two rangers buried alive in the Montana snow, he thinks it's a rescue. But what he pulls from the ice isn't just human. It's a secret the mountains were never meant to give back. And by the time the storm ends, mercy itself will have a price. Winter in the Montana highlands was a living god. Merciless, beautiful, absolute. Along Bitter Creek Ridge, the wind screamed. It bent the pines until they creaked like old bones. Snow swallowed everything, color, sound, hope. The frozen ground cracked under its own weight, the ice splitting like the skin of some sleeping beast. There were no birds, no running streams, only the thin breath of wind and the whisper of falling snow. The sun was a blade of pale gold, cutting through clouds but offering no warmth. It only revealed a valley drowned in silver and silence. Out here, time didn't move forward, it just hovered, suspended between storms. Jack Raw had learned to live inside that silence. He was 42, tall, broad-shouldered. His beard was salt and iron, a rough frame for a face weathered by war and winters alike. His eyes, cold steel blue, held the same exhaustion as the mountains around him. Once he'd been a medic, a rescue specialist in Afghanistan. Once he'd believed in duty. Then came the ambush, a single night of dust and fire that burned away everything he thought he was. Now he lived alone. His cabin was a small wooden box miles from the nearest paved road, a structure older than his regrets. No wife, no family, no radio calls except the static of the wind. Every morning was a ritual. Coffee, black and scalding. Check the oil stove, clean the rifle, record the temperature, the wind, the animal tracks. The habits kept him sane. They gave shape to days that might otherwise collapse into memory. Sometimes the sharp crack of a branch would pull him back too fast. His hand would twitch toward the rifle before he caught himself, breath uneven. He wasn't afraid of the forest. He was afraid of the silence. It sounded too much like the seconds before an explosion. Out here, he'd mutter to no one, the only blasts come from the sky. Outside, his only companion waited, a creature far too large for the fragile quiet of the valley. Titan. The horse stood nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, its coat a deep black that held a blue sheen when the light struck just right. Across its neck ran a deep, curved scar, a mark from the wildfire that had nearly taken them both 3 years ago. Its eyes were amber, unnervingly bright, as if they held thoughts, not just reflections. Jack had found him half buried in ash after that fire, a burned, dying animal tangled in barbed wire. He'd cut the wire, carried water in his cupped hands, refused to leave even when the smoke thickened around them. The horse had survived, miraculously. Ever since, it had followed him like a shadow. "Just you and me, big guy," Jack would say, patting its massive flank. Man and horse, marked by different kinds of flame. Jack carried his scars inside. Titan wore his on the surface. Between them stretched a bond made of silence and shared endurance. That morning, the air was brittle with cold, 15 below. Jack tightened the strap of his coat, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and mounted Titan. The animal snorted, steam rising from its nostrils like smoke from a furnace. They rode east into the woods, following a narrow trail that bordered an old fenced zone. Faded government signs, half buried in frost, warned them away. Restricted area, U.S. Forestry and Research Zone. Jack scanned the tree line through his binoculars. Deer tracks, no human prints, a few rusted shell casings, half buried in ice, relics of hunters who shouldn't have been there. He noted everything in his small field book. As they crested a ridge, the ruins of the old caldera facility came into view. A concrete bunker clinging to the mountainside like a wound that refused to heal. The place had been sealed after a chemical explosion 15 years back. No one had been allowed near it since. Titan stopped. Suddenly, muscles tensing under Jack's legs. The horse pawed at the snow, snorting, its ears twitching toward the valley below. "Easy, boy," Jack murmured. "Just the wind." But the wind had stopped. In that stillness, something felt wrong, like nature holding its breath. Titan's ears pricked again, head turning east. A sharp, guttural whinny tore through the quiet. Jack frowned, lifted his binoculars and scanned the slope. The white expanse stretched smooth and empty, until he saw it. A dark shape, half buried in the snow, like a shadow frozen mid-fall. He tied Titan to a pine and started down the slope. Each step broke the crust of snow with a dry, hollow crunch. The air burned his lungs. 20 meters away, he realized it wasn't a shadow. It was a person. He dropped to his knees beside the shape, a woman face down, her hair black against the white. Her cheeks were raw purple, her lips blue. He brushed away more snow and froze. A second body lay only a few feet away. This one wore a torn ranger jacket, a dull metal badge half visible. Ranger Division. Both were bound at the wrists with nylon cord, half buried, half alive. Jack's breath caught. His training took over. He pulled his knife, slicing the bindings. The cord was military-grade, tied in a compression knot he hadn't seen since Kandahar. This wasn't some backwoods kidnapping. This was professional. He checked their pulses, faint but steady. "You're alive," he whispered. "Hang in there." One had a bleeding shoulder wound. Both were freezing. He stripped off his own coat, wrapping it around the first woman, rubbing their hands, trying to coax warmth back into their skin. He lit a small bundle of gauze soaked in fuel, not enough for heat, just enough for smoke. A signal. Maybe someone would see. Maybe. Above him, Titan let out another harsh, echoing cry. Jack looked up. The sky had gone from silver to the color of steel. The wind was coming back, heavier, colder, carrying the taste of a monster storm. "Not now," he muttered. "Not yet." He hoisted the first woman over his shoulder, then the second. He secured them across Titan's broad back, swung himself up behind them, and gripped the reins tight. "Hold steady, big guy. We're not losing them." Titan reared, then plunged forward into the rising white. Snow came down sideways, a blinding torrent of white knives. Titan thundered through the forest, hooves pounding against the crusted ground. Jack leaned low against the horse's neck, squinting through the chaos, his breath crystallizing in the air. The cabin finally appeared, a faint outline half buried under snow. Relief seized him. The fire was dead. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. He pulled to a halt, jumped down, and caught the limp weight of the women, dragging them onto the porch. "Stay! Guard!" he barked at the horse. Titan snorted a gust of steam, planting himself by the door like a sentry cast in black iron. Inside, Jack kicked the door shut against the wind. He threw wood and oil into the fireplace and struck a match. The room flared orange. He worked fast. He wrapped his heavy coat around the first woman, the one with black hair and the deep shoulder wound. Her face, pale under the soot, was sharp, resolute. A nameplate hung broken from her torn jacket, Elise Ward. The second woman, younger, thin, olive-skinned, had no tag. Her pulse was slower, weaker. He poured whiskey over a rag and rubbed their hands and chests, chasing life back into cold flesh. The smell of smoke, alcohol, and iron filled the small space. Outside, Titan paced, hooves thudding softly, low rumbles making the window panes tremble. Jack didn't look up. He'd seen worse, but never this alone. "Hang on, ladies," he murmured. "You made it this far." Minutes crawled by. Then Elise gasped, her eyelids fluttered. Jack leaned in. "Easy. You're safe now." Her eyes darted around, unfocused. Her voice came out cracked and raw. "They buried us. Because we found it." Jack frowned. "Found what?" She met his gaze, something wild flickering behind the exhaustion. "Under the ridge." Her voice broke and she collapsed back into unconsciousness. Jack stared at her. Outside, the wind howled. Titan stomped once, twice, a restless drumbeat. He pulled the blanket tighter around them, sat back on his heels and listened. The sound of their shallow breathing filled the room, the same fragile rhythm he'd heard on battlefields just before dawn. This wasn't an accident, he thought. This was an execution that failed. The storm hit with full fury. Snow and wind hammered the cabin, rattling every board. Jack drove a wooden beam across the door and turned the lantern down low. Titan stood outside, black against the white fury, his mane whipped by the wind. He didn't flinch. His amber eyes glowed through the snow like small fires refusing to die. Inside, Jack moved quietly, checking their gear. He rummaged through Elise's torn jacket and found a waterproof pouch. Inside was a small data drive, metallic, engraved with a faint, icy logo. Mercer Dynamics. He turned it over in his fingers. The name hit him like static. Sand. Heat. A blinding explosion. He'd seen that same logo flicker across a field monitor in the back of a military ambulance. Mercer Dynamics. Tactical Biology Division. Then the blast had cut the signal and everything went dark. Now here it was again, buried in a ranger's coat 15 years later. "What the hell were you two doing up there?" he muttered. He slipped the drive into his pocket. He looked at the wound on Elise's shoulder. It wasn't a bullet hole. It was a puncture, small and clean. He probed it gently with a pair of sterilized tweezers. He pulled something out, a tiny metal cylinder no bigger than a grain of rice. A transmitter, a tracking beacon. His blood went cold. They hadn't just been left for dead. They'd been tagged. Old rumors whispered through his mind, tales of a classified project named Caldera. Neural warfare, animals wired for combat, prototypes that escaped before the program was shut down. He stared at Titan through the frosted glass, the massive black silhouette, unmoving in the blizzard. The horse had survived wounds no creature should. Its strength, its awareness. It was unnatural, almost human. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible. He's just a horse." But as if in answer, Titan lifted his head toward the cabin and let out a long, low cry. A sound too deep, too knowing. Jack froze. The hairs on his arms rose. He turned the lantern down until only the embers glowed. Outside, the storm swallowed everything, sound, light, and truth. Jack sat with his rifle across his knees, eyes on the door, waiting. The world was white beyond the window, and the cabin felt smaller with every breath. A fragile island caught between mercy and something else entirely. The fire had burned down to a handful of dull embers. Jack sat slumped in the chair beside it, rifle resting against his boot. The storm still clawed at the cabin walls, a constant rhythm, like the pulse of something immense surrounding them. Elise stirred, murmuring words he couldn't make out. The other woman, Ava, hadn't moved in hours. For the first time in years, Jack let his eyes close. He didn't sleep long. A thunderous, guttural whinny shattered the silence. The windows rattled in their frames. Titan. Jack's head snapped up, heart slamming against his ribs. Through a narrow crack between the boards, a flicker of light danced across the storm, yellow and moving. Not lightning, the cut of artificial beams. He stepped closer. The light swung again, joined by another, then another. Engines, faint, muffled, struggling against the snow. His pulse slowed, not from calm, but the opposite. The old rhythm of combat returned, steadying his breath. Figures emerged from the white, 4 of them, bulky, deliberate, carrying rifles with mounted lamps that sliced through the blizzard. Their movements were precise, trained, not rangers, not rescuers, soldiers. Elise's eyes fluttered open. Her voice was a ghost. "They found us." Jack turned sharply, pressing a finger to his lips. She froze. He moved fast, kicking dirt over the fire, smothering the last ember. He twisted the lantern shut. The room fell into a darkness so thick it pressed against the skin. Outside, their voices crackled through radios, barely audible. "Target last seen near the ridge. Sweep the perimeter." "Copy, moving west." One of them reached the stable and kicked the door. Titan answered with a furious snort, stamping hard enough to shake snow from the roof. The beam of a flashlight caught the horse's eyes, bright amber reflections in the dark. Titan didn't retreat. He stood tall, muscles coiling. Jack's grip tightened on the shotgun. He checked the breech, 2 shells. He breathed slow, the way he'd been trained. Behind him, Elise fumbled with her pack, the faint click of a folding knife. "You shouldn't fight them," she whispered. "You got a better idea," he muttered back. No answer, just the sound of snow scraping against wood as one of the men approached the cabin door. "Search inside," a voice ordered. Low, calm, practiced. The next moment shattered everything, a crash of glass. The back window exploded inward. A figure rolled through, rifle raised. Jack pivoted, fired once. The blast shook the walls. The man went down, armor dented, gasping. Another burst of splintered wood. Two more stormed in from the front, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Jack dove sideways, pulling Elise down. His second shot thundered, the muzzle flash turning the room into a strobe of orange and shadow. From outside came a violent crack. The stable door shattered. Titan's roar filled the storm, a sound not entirely animal, deep enough to vibrate through bone. The horse burst through the snow-laden doorway, mane wild, eyes blazing gold. One of the soldiers swung his light and froze, disbelief on his face, just before Titan charged. The impact was brutal, a blur of black muscle and flailing limbs. The man hit the wall with a wet crack and slid down. The second man turned his rifle toward the beast. Too slow, Titan's shoulder slammed him off his feet, hooves crashing against the floorboards. Jack grabbed a fallen rifle, spun and fired through the front window at the remaining silhouette outside. A scream vanished into the storm. The cabin burned with movement, smoke, snow, the smell of powder and blood. Elise crawled toward Ava, clutching her shoulder. "Jack!" He didn't answer. He was already reloading. Through the chaos, he caught Titan's eye. The animal turned, nostrils flaring, as if waiting for a command. "Get them out!" Jack yelled. "Now!" Titan snorted and backed toward the door. Elise understood. Jack hauled Ava's limp body up, laying her across Titan's broad back. Elise climbed behind, holding her steady. "Hold on to her," Jack's voice cut through the wind. "He knows the way." Titan reared, smashing through the half-collapsed doorway into the blinding storm. Bullets whipped past, sparks flaring off frozen wood. One round sliced through the air, grazing the horse's mane. Titan didn't falter. He lunged forward, vanishing into the white. Elise clung to Ava's body, face pressed into the horse's neck. The world had no direction, only movement, sound, and pain. Behind them, Jack fired twice more, covering their retreat. Then he, too, disappeared into the veil of snow. From a distance, it might have looked like myth. A black shadow cutting through a world of white, chased by ghosts. Each thunder of Titan's hooves echoed through the storm, matching the hammer of Elise's heart. She didn't know how long they rode. Time dissolved. When Titan finally slowed, the roar of wind softened. The jagged stone walls of a narrow canyon rose around them, sheltering them from the storm. The world here was dim, quiet, carved from shadow and breath. Elise slid off the horse, nearly collapsing beside Ava, who still hadn't regained consciousness. Her shoulder throbbed, blood seeping through the bandage. Jack appeared moments later, emerging from the white like a ghost. Snow crusted his beard, eyes sharp. "You two all right?" Elise laughed, a sound closer to pain. "Define all right." She nodded toward Ava. "She's barely breathing." Titan stood at the mouth of the canyon, sides heaving, steam rolling off his body. His flanks glistened with melted snow and streaks of blood, not all his own. He turned his head, exhaling a long, heavy sigh that sounded almost human. Jack glanced up at the ridge. The storm still raged beyond the canyon walls. "Won't hold forever," he said. Elise met his eyes, her face pale. "Mercer's erasing everything." Jack frowned. "Mercer?" Her voice broke. "The Caldera Project. It's still alive." He didn't speak. The name hit like a forgotten gunshot. "We found the entrance," she shivered. "Under the ridge. They buried the lab, but not the people." A muscle jumped in Jack's jaw. "And Mercer sent his men to clean it up." She nodded weakly. "If they find us again, they won't miss." The words hung in the air, cold and final. Jack stepped to Titan, resting a hand against the horse's neck. The beast was trembling, sweat steaming through its coat, despite the freezing air. Jack's voice was barely a whisper. "Then we move before dawn." They built a small fire in the shelter of the rocks, a faint ember against the dark. The canyon smelled of smoke, blood, and cold stone. Titan stood at the entrance, his massive form blocking the wind. Elise sat on a blanket, jaw set, as she threaded a needle through the wound on her shoulder. Jack had given her his medkit, and now she worked in silence, stitching her own flesh with steady, shaking hands. Jack sat nearby, cleaning dried blood from his shotgun. The silence between them carried the weight of everything unsaid. When Elise finally tied off the last stitch, she leaned back against the stone wall, exhaling shakily. Jack looked at her, firelight drawing hard lines across his face. "You should rest." She gave a tired half-smile. "You say that like rest is an option." The wind shifted, softer now. The storm was finally breaking. The fire popped. Titan's ears twitched. His head lifted slightly, eyes glowing amber. He watched the snow drift past the canyon's mouth, then lowered his head again, a silent sentinel. Jack glanced at Elise, then at the horse, then back to the flames. For the first time in a long time, he didn't know which he trusted more, the people beside him or the creature guarding them. In that fragile quiet, Jack knew the night hadn't ended. It had only paused. Morning came pale and thin. The storm had passed, leaving the forest draped in silence. Mist curled above the snow. Jack sat on a flat rock overlooking the ridge, cleaning his rifle. Below him, Titan tore at a patch of dry grass. Behind them, Elise was awake, wrapping a blanket around Ava. The younger woman stirred, drifting between fevered dreams. The forest was eerily quiet. "We need to reach town," Jack said, eyes on the horizon. "She needs a doctor." Elise looked up, her expression hard. "If we leave now," she said quietly, "they'll cover it up again. Everything. We have to expose them." Jack met her gaze. That unyielding glint in her eyes reminded him of soldiers who had already accepted death as a form of duty. He said nothing. He just turned toward Titan. They left the canyon shortly after, Jack walking beside the horse, hand on the reins. The land had changed. The storm had scraped it raw. Halfway along the ridge, Elise lifted a pair of binoculars and scanned the horizon. Then she froze. "There," she said, pointing north. Jack followed her gaze. Barely visible through the trees were tracks, deep, even lines pressed into the snow, too wide for deer, too heavy for hunters, ATVs. "That's them," Elise murmured. Jack knelt. The pattern was unmistakable. Tactical-grade tires. He brushed snow from the grooves. "They're headed north," he said, "toward the ridge." "Caldera Ridge," Elise said quietly. "After the explosion, Mercer bought everything. The land, the records, the silence." Jack stood, slinging the rifle back over his shoulder, so he's still cleaning house. They followed the tracks for hours. Titan never faltered. The horse moved as if he already knew the way, purposeful and sure. Jack noticed it more and more, the intelligence behind those amber eyes, the way Titan seemed to read the terrain before a sound or scent could warn him. He told himself it was instinct, years of trust. But the thought didn't sit right. When they finally stopped to rest, the sun had sunk low, painting the snow a bruised gold. That was when Ava awoke. Her eyes opened in panic, darting from face to face. "You're safe," Elise said softly. "It's over, for now." Ava's lips were cracked, her voice rough. "You shouldn't have found us," she whispered. "This was supposed to stay buried." Jack turned sharply. "You knew about this?" Elise hesitated, then nodded. "She was one of us. We worked in Caldera together." Ava shook her head, tears welling. "We shut it down, Elise. We swore we'd never open it again. I triggered the explosion. I was trying to destroy it all." Elise's voice hardened. "Then why did Mercer's men try to kill us?" Ava looked away. "I don't know. I thought it was gone. I thought it was all destroyed." Jack watched them. "Whatever is buried up there," he said, his voice flat, "it's killing people now." The words hung in the air like frost. Even Titan seemed to react, a low, uneasy sound rumbling in his chest. The wind returned, dragging cold through the trees. Somewhere beyond the mountains lay answers, and maybe something worse. By dusk, they found a small ranger's cabin, its roof sagging under ice. Jack kicked the door open. One room, empty except for a rusted stove and a broken table. "It'll do." Titan was tied beneath the overhang, though he hardly needed restraint. He stood motionless, guarding the threshold. Inside, Jack sparked a fire. The warmth spread slowly. Elise crouched by her bag, pulling out the waterproof pouch. "I need to show you something." She took out the data drive, the one with the Mercer Dynamics logo, and plugged it into a battered laptop. The screen flickered to life, pale blue light on her face. Her fingers trembled as she typed. Lines of data appeared. Project Caldera, Neural Enhancement, Classified. Primary Subject, Cal-01. Status, Decommissioned. Then came the video. Static, then movement. A sterile lab. White walls. In the center of the frame stood a massive black horse, restrained by metal braces. Electrodes lined its neck. Its skull was partially shaved, revealing implants beneath the skin. A deep curved scar was visible where an incision had been hastily closed. Elise's voice was barely a whisper. They called it neural adaptation, building response pathways between instinct and command. Her next words hit Jack like a physical blow. Titan was the first subject. Jack stared at the screen. He couldn't move. Then the next line on the file header. Subject, Titan. The cabin seemed to shrink. The only sound was the faint whine of wind through a cracked window. Elise shut the laptop. Jack's eyes stayed fixed on the floorboards. A memory pushed through the noise. Flames, smoke, the weight of a dying animal in his arms, the stubborn heartbeat that refused to quit. The way Titan had stared at him through the fire, calm, unafraid. He'd always thought it was courage. Now he wasn't sure what it was. He stepped outside. The cold hit him like a slap. Snow crunched behind him. Elise's voice followed. "You didn't know, did you?" Jack didn't turn. "He's been with me 3 years," he said flatly. "He saved my life. Don't you dare call him an experiment." Elise came closer. "He's not a monster, Jack. He's proof Mercer went too far." Jack laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Proof? Look what his proof has done. Look at the bodies in the snow." Titan shifted beside them, his great head turning slowly. His eyes caught the fading light, glinting like molten gold. He stood still, listening. From inside the cabin came Ava's weak voice. "He shouldn't exist." Jack turned, meeting Elise's gaze, something fierce in his eyes. "Then maybe neither should the people who made him." Elise didn't flinch. "That's why we need to end it," she said softly. "Properly this time." For a long moment, no one spoke. The air felt brittle, as if one wrong word might shatter it. Then Jack exhaled, slow and resigned. Titan whinnied low, the sound deep and resonant. The wind picked up, scattering flakes of snow. Jack looked out toward the distant ridge, where the last light of day bled behind the peaks. "Then we finish it," he said quietly. "No more running." Titan stamped once, a cloud of steam curling around him, and raised his head toward the mountains. The snow fell harder. The world was already trying to bury the past again. This time, they wouldn't let it. Night had come quietly. The wind whispered through the gaps in the old cabin's walls. Inside, the fire burned low, the room washed in amber light. Elise sat near the door, her gaze fixed on Titan. In the far corner, Ava leaned against the wall, her face pale. Jack sat between them, cleaning his shotgun. The scrape of metal and cloth was the only sound. Then Elise broke the silence. "I helped design Caldera," she said, her voice low. "It was meant for rescue animals, search and recovery, that's all." Jack didn't look up. "Mercer changed it," she continued. "He turned a rescue program into a weapons lab. Neural implants, combat conditioning. They called it the next phase of biological warfare." Her eyes flicked toward Titan. "He wasn't just stronger. He could think. Adapt faster than anything we'd ever seen." Ava's voice cracked from the corner. "We buried the others in ice, the prototypes that failed. We thought it was over." Jack set the shotgun down. The firelight caught the steel in his expression. "You made soldiers out of mercy." Elise's lips trembled. "We made victims out of trust." The fire hissed. Outside, Titan shifted, a low rumble rolling through the cabin like thunder. It was a sound that didn't belong to any ordinary animal, too deep, too knowing. "Whatever Mercer's after, he's not done," Jack said. "If he knows we're alive—" Elise cut in softly. "He knows." "How?" "Because he always knows," she said, her eyes haunted. "Every subject was linked to a signal chain, even the decommissioned ones. If Titan's still active, he's their beacon." Jack's jaw clenched. He glanced at the porch again. Titan stood perfectly still, head raised, listening to something only he could hear. The wind changed. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a faint rhythmic hum began to rise, too low for thunder, too steady for the wind. Jack's eyes narrowed. Elise heard it next. "Engines," she whispered. He moved to the window. Through the trees, faint beams of light cut through the night, moving in formation. The low growl of ATV motors grew clearer. Elise blew out the lamp. The cabin plunged into darkness. She kicked snow over the embers until the light died completely. Outside, Titan lifted his head, ears pricked, body tensing. Jack loaded 2 fresh shells. "Get down." Elise crouched behind an overturned table, pulling Ava with her. Muffled voices crackled through the wall. "Target last seen near the ridge. Copy that. Heat signal confirmed. Move in." A shadow passed across the window. A soldier. Titan stamped once, a heavy thud. "Stay quiet," Jack murmured. The soldiers paused. One of them kicked the stable door. Titan's answering snort made the glass tremble. "What the hell was that?" one man said. "Horse. Shoot the damn thing if it moves." The window shattered inward. A bullet tore through the wall, splinters exploding. Jack dropped to one knee and fired. The first intruder crashed backward, his rifle clattering into the snow. "Move!" Jack barked. More glass broke. Flashlight beams cut through the smoke. Another soldier kicked the door open and charged inside. Jack rolled and fired again. The room erupted into thunder. Titan screamed from the porch. The rope holding him snapped. The horse exploded through the doorway like a wave of living muscle and fury. The soldier nearest the door froze long enough to see the blur of black before Titan hit him square in the chest. He flew into the far wall. Another man shouted, "Fire!" But the next sound was the crash of metal as Titan slammed into one of the ATVs. The vehicle flipped, its headlights slicing the night as it spun. Jack grabbed Elise by the arm. "Move!" A bullet sang past. Ava cried out, a short, choked sound. "She's hit!" Elise screamed. Jack turned, saw blood blooming on Ava's coat. No time. He caught her under the arms, dragged her up. "We're moving. Now." Outside, Titan tore through the remaining soldiers like a storm given shape. Steam rose from his body, his eyes blazing. Every movement was purposeful, brutal, precise. Jack fired twice more, covering their escape, then kicked the back door open. The cold night swallowed them whole. The forest howled. Titan came barreling from the darkness, blood streaking his flanks. Jack lifted Ava onto the saddle, then Elise. "Hold on to her," Jack shouted. "He knows the way." Titan surged forward. Behind them, gunfire rattled through the trees. Bullets hissed past. Jack fired over his shoulder, then ducked low, pressing himself against the horse's flank as they broke through the pines. The world turned white again, wind and snow slashing at their faces. Elise clung to Ava, the younger woman's head resting against her shoulder. The blood was warm against her arm, terrifyingly warm. "Don't stop," she whispered to herself. "Don't stop." They rode through the blizzard like fugitives from some forgotten war. 3 souls and a creature that shouldn't exist, fleeing through a landscape that refused to forgive. By late afternoon, the light turned the mountains to copper. Titan led the way, crushing a steady staircase into the drifts. Caldera Ridge fanned above them, a set of broken crowns. Black scars crisscrossed the white where trees had never grown back. Old smoke stains clung to the rock. Even after 15 winters, the mountain remembered. Elise pointed with her chin. "It's right here. The entrance. It won't look like anything. Just a bruise in the snow." Jack walked a wide circle, eyes on the ground. He crouched, pressing his glove to a shallow depression. Beneath the snow, the texture changed. Not rock, not root. Metal. He pushed aside more snow. Under a net of ice and moss lay the corner of a steel hatch, seams welded, edges furred with rust. "Found your bruise." They cleared the hatch. Faint letters appeared in the metal. Mercer Dynamics. A rusted service panel sat beside the seam. Elise popped it with a knife and pulled out shredded wires. "Power's dead," she muttered, "but the lock is simple enough." She stripped 2 leads with her teeth, twisted copper together. Sparks snapped. Somewhere inside the hatch, something clicked. A downward groan rolled through the snow. Titan stamped. The sound ricocheted. His ears flattened. He knew this place. "Easy," Jack said, hand on Titan's neck. The hatch lifted a foot, coughing out a lungful of air that smelled like a tomb. Frost breathed from the dark, and with it the metallic tang of forgotten things. Elise flicked on her flashlight and went first. Jack followed, rifle up. Ava came last, one hand trailing the wall. The corridor swallowed them. Emergency lights pulsed a dull red every 10 meters. Ghosts on backup power. They passed the first sign, biosecurity, authorized personnel only. The paint flaked like dried blood. Across the next stretch of wall, a slogan bled through raised letters. Nature. Engineered. Ava touched the words, her fingers trembling. We used to walk these halls every morning, she whispered. Coffee in one hand, clipboards. We thought we were saving the world. The hall widened. They stepped into the central bay. The lab was a graveyard. Glass tanks the size of cattle cars lined the room, some intact and filmed with frost, some shattered. Inside a handful of them, things lay where gravity had left them. Skeletal forms, tangled skin collapsed into tar. A dog's deeper chest, a wolf's lengthened leg, a horse's heavy skull riddled with lacing where wires might have met bone. One tank held something else. Not a skeleton, flesh, pale and bloated, suspended in murky fluid. As Titan's shadow fell across it, a single cloudy eye opened. An arm, too long with too many joints, twitched against the glass. Elise stopped, palm over her mouth. They were supposed to be decommissioned, she said, buried. Ava couldn't look away. Tears froze at the corners of her eyes. My God, she said, her voice small, we made them. Jack palmed the nearest tank. Gouges ran through the steel frame beside it, 5 deep arcs spaced like fingers. No, not fingers. A hoof. A claw. He thought of Titan's hooves ringing on concrete, of a door exploding, of a black animal shouldering through gunfire. He drifted to the command console. Elise slid in beside him and powered it with a battery pack. The screen bloomed a pale blue. Project Caldera. She clicked through menus her hands remembered. The last tab came up on a grid of signal bands. One pulse burned bright. Cal 01, active signal detected. That's him, Jack said. He's still linked, Elise swallowed. A dormant loop. Mercer must be tracking him through it. The wind moaned through a broken skylight. Titan released a small, raw sound from the doorway. A whimper, if a mountain could whimper. Jack turned. The red lights flickered. Somewhere deeper in the complex, something answered. A slow, even rhythm. Heel and toe. Heel and toe. Elise's hands froze over the keyboard. You've made it further than most, a voice said, cool and deep, carrying from the shadowed hall. Jack lifted the rifle, stepping in front of the women. A man came into the light, silver hair combed back. A coat so black it made the red emergency lights look pink. He walked like someone who assumed the world would wait. He did not carry a weapon. He did not look at the rifle pointed at his chest. Colin Mercer, Elise breathed. He spared her a glance. Elise. His gaze moved past Jack, toward the doorway where a larger dark waited. A small, pleased smile lifted his mouth. You brought me my horse back, Mr. Raw. Jack's finger tightened. He's not yours. Mercer's eyes clicked back to him. Everything in here was mine. Every strand of code, every heartbeat we engineered. Titan is no different. Elise stepped forward. You lied to all of us. We thought we were building a rescue platform. Mercer tilted his head. And you did save people, until politics decided to bury what they couldn't control. I merely refused to let a good idea drown. He glanced at Titan, his expression warming. That animal survived wildfire and your guilt. Don't you see? His evolution is perfected. You turned mercy into a weapon, Jack said, his voice low. Mercer shrugged. Every war needs monsters. The problem is, monsters don't always stay loyal. His smile widened, but they do remember their maker. He raised his hand as if asking for silence. The facility answered. Sirens crackled to life. Red became redder. The floor thrummed, a machine heartbeat kicking awake. From the corridors, men appeared. Black armor, compact weapons, the same yellow beams that had carved the storm. Elise stumbled back to the console. He's reactivating the system, she shouted. I can pull a data dump if I can keep the grid up. Do it, Jack said, not looking away from Mercer. Mercer smiled. Let's see, he said gently, if your creation still remembers. He pressed a button on a small remote. From a speaker above them, a high-frequency tone pierced the air, inaudible to the humans, but not to the horse. Titan screamed, a sound of pure agony. He staggered, his legs buckling. "Stop it," Elise yelled. "This is just a reminder," Mercer said calmly, "a recall signal, to remind him who he serves." Titan's eyes, once molten gold, began to flicker. A cold, white light bled into them from the pupils outward. He fought it, shaking his massive head, but the white spread, consuming the gold. He was losing himself. "Jack," Elise cried out, "the servers, I'm on it." The laptop screen showed a progress bar. Data transfer, 6%, 11%, a tank split, exhaling a greenish vapor. "Careful," Elise shouted, "don't breathe it." Ava moved, a fallen soldier's pistol in her hands. She fired twice, then staggered as a round hit her arm. She hit the floor. "Go," she gasped when Jack reached for her. "Finish it." He put his back between her and the gunfire, firing measured shots that didn't miss. Through the haze, Mercer lifted a radio. "Sedated. Non-lethal first. Asset retention preferred." Titan crashed through the green fog, tearing a gantry from the wall. Metal rained down. Elise hunched at the console, the progress bar jumping. 42%, 63%, 76%. A bullet tore the corner of the laptop screen. The image wobbled, held. Another tank hissed open. Titan shouldered through the spray, his hide slick. He bellowed, a sound so enormous the soldiers faltered. One dropped his gun and ran. "Jack," Elise cried, "we're out of time." The bar hit 97%. He put himself between Elise and the world, emptying his last shells. "Done," she said, her voice very small. "Then we go," Jack said, shoving new shells in by feel. Mercer's calm finally broke. "Switch to lethal," he said into the radio. "The asset is expendable. The data is not. Kill the horse." Titan turned his head, as if he understood. The last of the gold in his eyes flared, one final ember of defiance. He lunged. Not at Mercer, at the heart of the room. He hit the generator housing like a battering ram. Steel screamed, cables spit light. The lights dropped, came back ugly, stuttered. Sparks wheeled through the fog. A halo of blue-white light flared around Titan's shoulders, his mane standing on end as if electrified. "The system is failing," Elise yelled. "If we're still in here when it goes—" A gantry above them broke free and fell, crushing the console. The laptop tumbled, still lit. Through the smoke, Jack saw Ava, curled on the ground. She met his eyes and almost smiled. "Go," she whispered. He would have gone back for her, but Titan moved again. The horse staggered, then reared and brought both front hooves down on the generator's core. The panel buckled. The sound became a deeper thunder, a mountain remembering it had a voice. Everything leapt. The concussion rolled through the lab. First a lungful of lights going out, then a boom that turned into a long growl as the generator bled itself to death. Fire unfurled from the housing like a dragon's tongue. It found the spilled chemicals and drank. Jack hooked an arm around Elise, hauling her toward the access door. Heat ran ahead of the flames, kissing their faces with 1,000 knives. Between the flaring fire, Mercer finally lost his footing. A support bar broke free and landed across his calves with a wet crack. He cried out, but in anger, not fear. Jack dragged Elise past him. He looked down and met the man's eyes. "You'll never bury this," Mercer ground out. "No," Jack said, "but I can bury you." The fire found Mercer's coat. Titan stood in the smoke like a figure from a myth. He turned his head toward Jack and Elise, and something like recognition passed between them. A question, an answer. Then he reared one last time and brought both hooves down on the generator's heart. The world came apart. The shockwave lifted them. Dust and flame roared up the corridor. The hatch at the surface blew, and the mountain exhaled fire. Jack clutched Elise and ran. They fell twice. The third time, they crawled. Behind them, the tunnel coughed heat like a dying dragon. They burst from the hatch into a sky the color of brass and violets. The wind hit them, cold and merciful. Jack pulled Elise clear, and they dropped into a hollow. An aftershock struck, and the hatch spat a column of flame that twisted in the air. Snow around the mouth collapsed into it and turned to steam. Jack tried to raise himself and realized hot metal was lodged in his shoulder. He tore it out with his teeth, and the world went grey. He kept moving. Elise crawled beside him, her breath hitching. "Jack," she said, his name an inventory of the living. He slid an arm under her, and they lay against the rock as cinders fell and died in the snow around them. Elise pressed her fist into his palm. He opened his hand and found the drive there, small and absolute. "Tell them what we did," she whispered. A geyser of fire rose behind her, painting the tears on her face like molten glass. He closed his fingers around the drive and bowed his head. Titan erupted from the hatch mouth like a shadow torn free, so big against the flame, so black against the snow. The horse landed, stumbled, and trotted unevenly toward them. Smoke rolled from his hide, his mane smoldered like a field of fireflies. He came to a halt and stood over them, chest heaving. His eyes were bright, wet, and golden with reflected fire. The white was gone. He was himself again. He looked down at Jack and Elise as if counting them. "Good boy," Jack said, because it was the only prayer he owned. The mountain quieted. The roar became a crackle, then a whisper. Titan lowered his head until his muzzle pressed against Jack's temple. Jack leaned into it, eyes closed, cheek against that battered warmth. When the wind shifted, Jack realized the storm had cleared. The sky above the ridge had cracked open to show a single hard star. They made it down the mountain like survivors of a shipwreck. 3 days later, rotors found them. A pair of federal helicopters banked low, whipping snow into white storms. Men in parkas poured out, their hands surprisingly gentle. Elise looked very small under a blanket. She didn't let go of Jack's hand until they loaded her onto the chopper. Then she reached for him again and pressed the drive into his palm. He nodded, tucking it deep inside his coat. "That's all that's left of Caldera," he told the officer in charge, his voice hoarse from smoke. "The rest is under the ridge." The news peeled out like shockwaves. Mercer Dynamics collapses, federal seizures underway, the Bitter Creek revelation. In a quiet conference room, Jack spilled out what Elise had saved. Memos, logs, reports so careful in tone they were obscene. Caldera was a patch of ice over a deep river. The files cracked it. The current did the rest. Elise woke in a military hospital. She accepted a camera crew because truth without a face dies faster. She sat up, pale and bandaged, and said her sentence into the lens like an oath. "We meant to save lives," she said, "but we forgot what makes us human." Jack did not appear in any footage. He signed forms. He told the story once into a recorder. When they asked him to come to Washington, he said he had a roof to fix. A man with a clean haircut came to ask if the government could study Titan. Jack asked, "Which government?" The man laughed. Jack didn't. The man left the paperwork on the table. It went into Jack's wood stove that night. Winter retreated. The snow shrank back. The cabin looked smaller in the spring light, humble, forgiving. Jack replaced shingles, oiled hinges. Sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to make ordinary things work again. Titan stood with the stall door open, choosing the view over any rope. He watched the ridge as if counting the breaths of a sleeping thing. A letter came in Elise's handwriting. "The world will remember your silence as mercy. I will remember it as loyalty. Keep him free. Keep yourself free. If you ever need me, I'll be where the records aren't." That night he sat by the stove, Titan's head heavy in his lap. He scratched along the ridge of bone where the scar curled. "Guess we made it, old friend." Titan made a sound that might have been a laugh if horses could laugh. Outside, a late snow sifted down. The moon made it all blue and made the scar on the ridge look like a lover's mark rather than a wound. Dawn came the way mercy comes, without drum or trumpet, only light. Jack walked up the slope beside Titan, both of them looking east. "Some monsters are made," he said, the truth settling in his bones. "Some are born, but the ones that survive, they just learn to carry the weight." Titan turned his head, and in those amber depths the morning sat warm and simple. "Let's go home," Jack said. They moved together across the slope, two black shapes against a world turning to gold. 6 months later, rain slid down the mirrored towers of Denver. Inside a windowless government annex, Elise Ward sat alone before a wall of screens. Thousands of neural recordings recovered from Caldera's ashes. Most were static, ghosts in the machine, but one stream pulsed, steady, rhythmic, alive. The tag read, Signal ID, Cal02, neural sync detected. Her breath stopped. That's impossible. There was only one. The next night she dug deeper. The signal pattern resembled Titan's, but its frequency was slightly off. Slower, colder, as if the mind behind it wasn't feeling, only rehearsing. She opened the old project registry. Cal02, auxiliary prototype. Neural backup host. Mercer had written it himself. In case of catastrophic loss, neural matrix may self-restore via long-range synchronization. Subject link optional, a backup, a shadow copy. But there was more. A hidden subfile, a personal log from Mercer. The horse is a perfect vessel, strong, resilient. But its will is unpredictable. A purer consciousness is required. My own. Elise stared at the lines until her reflection disappeared. Mercer hadn't been building one Titan. He'd been building a new body for himself, a form of immortality. Her terminal pinged. No sender, just a single message. It's awake, and it's looking for the original. Autumn had turned Bitter Creek gold. Jack's cabin sat quiet under the ridge. Titan grazed near the tree line, but at night he'd begun to act strangely. Lifting his head, nostrils flaring, as if listening to something far beyond the forest. The sound of a motor broke the silence. A jeep climbed the path. Elise stepped out. Something survived, she said, lifting a laptop case. Caldera. Titan's head shot up. He snorted, stamping hard. Mercer made a backup, Elise said, with his own mind in it. It might be calling to this one. Titan's eyes glowed faintly, amber shifting toward white. The sound that rose from his throat was neither a whinny nor a growl. Something in it remembered machines. 2 days later, they stood at the edge of the Nevada salt flats. A facility lay half buried beneath an old radar dish. The sign was faded. Mercer Dynamics, Echo Division. Inside, the lights flickered to life. A coffee mug sat by a terminal. Fresh footprints in the dust. The main server bay glowed. Code rippled across the screens. Elise's fingers flew over a console. Power's been rerouted. These systems shouldn't even exist. Jack nodded toward a pulsing readout. Cal02. Neural host synchronization complete. Awaiting subject link. It's waiting for him, Elise said. It's waiting for Titan. Outside, the horse screamed, a resonant sound that made the lights tremble. He's hearing it. They found the heart of Echo Station in the next chamber. A cylindrical tank filled with translucent fluid. Inside floated a mass of neural tissue, pale, veined, pulsing gently. Mercer's brain, kept alive and growing. It's still growing, Elise whispered, self-repairing. A speaker crackled to life. Mercer's voice, smooth as ever. If Titan survives, Cal02 will follow. Nature always finds a signal. The floor under the tank shifted. The lights dimmed. A synthetic voice filled the air. Neural host online. Establishing synchronization. Titan's answering roar was so loud the glass fractured. He tore free of his reins, the chain snapping like thread. The corridor lights strobed red as he charged. The tank's base split apart, revealing a second shape, a massive frame of alloy and bone, half-finished. Tubes pumped coolant over a form that resembled a horse but was made of metal fibers and sheathed glass. Its eyes opened, cold, white and empty. Cal02. It took its first breath through vents along its sides, exhaling steam. Jesus Christ, Jack muttered. It's him, without the mercy. Elise clawed at the terminal. If the link completes, it'll overwrite Titan. He'll lose himself. The real Titan appeared in the doorway, eyes molten gold. He's not going to let that happen, Jack said. Titan reared and crashed through the observation glass. Cal02 stepped forward, movements jerky. The two creatures faced each other, one breathing, one humming. Then they collided. The sound was beyond thunder, metal and flesh meeting with the force of history. Sparks filled the air. Titan slammed his head into the synthetic chest of his mirror. Cal02 retaliated, a piston-driven kick that shattered a column. The ceiling buckled. Elise crawled toward the main console, I can shut it down from inside, she gasped. Force a reboot. Jack fired into a cluster of servers, buying her seconds. Do it. He'll buy you the rest. Titan rammed again, horns of shattered steel scraping down his flanks. Electricity arced between them. His scream mixed animal pain with something almost human. Elise slammed the final command. The monitor flashed white. Core transfer executing. A rising whine filled the room. Titan drove his shoulder into the creature's chest one last time, forcing it back against the containment tank. Cal-02 convulsed, its eyes flickering, then exploding in a halo of static. The light swallowed everything. When sound returned, it came as silence. The lab lay in ruins. Elise coughed, forcing herself up. Her screen was blank, except for a single message. Signal lost. She turned. Titan stood amid the wreckage, chest heaving, flanks scorched black. The white gleam was gone from his eyes. Only gold remained, dim but his own. He took one staggering step and sank to his knees, smoke rising from his hide. Jack ran to him, pressing a palm against his chest. Beneath the burns, a heartbeat, heavy and real. Morning bled over the desert. Echo Station lay broken behind them. Elise stood beside Jack. Titan lay still among the wreckage. Then his ribcage moved. A deep, labored breath escaped him, steam instead of smoke. Elise choked out a laugh that was half a sob. He cut the link. He saved himself. Jack shook his head. No, he saved both of us. Somewhere inside the broken facility, a dying server flickered. On its cracked display, through static and digital snow, one final line appeared. Cal-02 terminated, signal rerouted. Bitter Creek node, active. Elise froze. Jack, she said, her voice small, there's another signal. It's coming from your valley. The wind picked up, scattering salt and ash. Titan pushed himself upright, slow but steady, golden eyes catching the sunrise. Jack slipped the shotgun over his shoulder. His voice was calm, quiet as a vow. Then it's not over. The light climbed higher, wrapping the three of them in its pale fire. Far to the east, beyond the mountains, something unseen hummed once, like a heartbeat returning to the world, waiting under the snow. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't miss out. Hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us.